The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Westridge High as Imani Jackson took a deep breath outside the main entrance. Her stomach felt like it was tied in knots. First days were always hard, but being the new girl in your senior year? That was a whole different kind of tough. Imani adjusted her backpack and glanced at her reflection in the glass doors. Her natural hair was cut close on the sides with just enough length on top to show her tight curls. The uniform she wore, khaki pants and a blue polo, looked crisp and neat, just the way her father had taught her. Presentation matters, he always said. The heavy doors swung open with a push, and Imani stepped into her new reality. The busy hallway seemed to slow down as heads turned her way. She felt the stares but kept her eyes forward, shoulders back, just like when she entered a competition ring. What these students didn't know, what nobody at Westridge High knew, was that Imani wasn't just any new student. Back in Atlanta, her name meant something in fighting circles. 3 junior MMA championship belts, 6 years of competitive judo, 9 years of kickboxing. Her father's dojo had been one of the most respected in the Southeast. But that was before the move. Before her dad got the offer to run the new martial arts center across town. A fresh start, he had called it. A chance to be known for something besides fighting, he had said with a knowing look. Imani had promised him she would keep her fighting background quiet and focus on her grades this year. The main hallway opened into a large common area where students gathered in tight circles, their laughter and chatter filling the space. Imani headed toward the office, clutching her schedule. She could feel curious eyes following her movement. "That's the new girl," someone whispered loud enough for her to hear. "Where's she from again?" Another voice asked. "Somewhere down south," came the reply. Imani kept walking, pretending not to hear. She'd been the new kid before, and she knew how this game worked. First came curiosity, then came the testing. Some schools were better than others, but there was always someone who wanted to establish the pecking order. As she approached the office, she noticed a group of girls standing by a row of lockers. They were dressed nearly identical, same style jeans, same brand shoes, hair styled in similar waves. At the center stood a girl with honey blonde hair and perfect makeup who was clearly in charge. Their conversation stopped as Imani walked by, replaced by whispers and side glances. The blonde girl's eyes narrowed as she sized Imani up, a small smirk forming on her glossy lips. Imani recognized that look. She'd seen it on opponents' faces before matches, that mix of judgment and underestimation. "You must be Imani," the secretary said warmly as she entered the office. "We've been expecting you." "I'm Mrs. Chen. Welcome to Westridge." The friendly face was a relief. "Thank you," Imani replied, her voice quieter than she intended. "Let me show you to your first class after we go through a few things," Mrs. Chen said, sorting through a folder. "How's your family settling in?" "Still unpacking," Imani said with a small smile. "Dad's getting the new training center ready to open next month." "Training center?" Mrs. Chen looked up with interest. Imani hesitated. "Yeah, he teaches martial arts." "How wonderful. Do you train too?" Again, Imani paused. "A little," she said, downplaying years of intensive training. "Just basics." As Mrs. Chen led her through the school, pointing out classrooms and facilities, Imani caught sight of the blonde girl again, watching her from across the hall with 2 friends on either side. "That's Madison Taylor," Mrs. Chen said quietly, following Imani's gaze. "She's our student body president." Madison whispered something to her friends, and they all laughed while staring directly at Imani. The challenge in those eyes was clear. Imani just nodded and continued following Mrs. Chen. She had faced tougher opponents on the mat than some high school queen bee. But she had made a promise to her father: no fighting, no trouble. This year was about blending in, not standing out. If only Madison Taylor knew what those calm hands at Imani's sides were capable of. If only she knew. 2 weeks had passed since Imani's first day at Westridge High, and she was still trying to find her place. The school routine was easy enough to learn. It was the social landscape that proved tricky to navigate. She'd managed to make a few friendly connections, mostly with other students who existed outside Madison's inner circle. Imani sat in the cafeteria, picking at her lunch while reading a book for English class. Across from her sat Jasmine, a bright-eyed girl with colorful beaded braids who had been kind to Imani from day one. "Don't look now," Jasmine whispered, "but Madison's watching you again." Imani didn't need to look. She could feel those eyes boring into her back. For the past 2 weeks, Madison had made a hobby out of making Imani feel unwelcome. It started with whispers that stopped when Imani got close. Then came the laughs whenever she spoke up in class. Yesterday, Madison had accidentally knocked Imani's books from her hands as they passed in the hallway. "What's her problem anyway?" Imani asked, still not turning around. "You," Jasmine said simply. "You're pretty, you're new, and you don't seem scared of her." That's 3 strikes in Madison's book. Jasmine took a bite of her apple and chewed thoughtfully. "Plus, Tyler from the track team has been asking about you, and he's Madison's ex." Imani groaned. "Great, I'm in some high school drama I never signed up for." "Madison's not just regular mean," Jasmine warned, leaning closer. "Last year, a girl named Becky transferred in and made the mistake of sitting at Madison's lunch table without an invitation. By the end of the month, Becky had 0 friends and ended up changing schools. Madison knows everybody and their secrets. She's taken down girls for less than just existing and being beautiful." As if on cue, a shoulder bumped hard against Imani as someone walked past, causing her water bottle to spill across her lunch tray. "Oops," Madison said with fake concern, her friends giggling behind her. "Didn't see you there." Imani took a deep breath. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "Control your reactions, control the situation." She grabbed some napkins and began cleaning up the mess without a word. Madison lingered, clearly disappointed by the lack of reaction. "You don't talk much, do you, new girl? Cat got your tongue." Imani looked up then, meeting Madison's gaze directly. She didn't speak, didn't need to. Something in her steady look made Madison's smirk falter for just a second. "Whatever," Madison muttered before walking away, her friends in tow. "Whoa," Jasmine breathed once they were gone. "The way you looked at her just now. I thought you were gonna jump across the table at her." Imani forced a smile. "Not my style." But the truth was, it had taken everything in her not to respond. Years of training had taught her body to react instinctively to aggression. When Madison bumped her, Imani's muscles had tensed automatically, ready to counter. It took more discipline to do nothing than to act. That evening, Imani descended the stairs to her family's basement, which her father had converted into a small dojo. The familiar smell of the mats greeted her, a mix of disinfectant and the faint scent of sweat that never quite washed out. This space felt like home when nothing else did. She wrapped her hands methodically, each turn of the cloth around her wrists a ritual that centered her mind. Then she turned to the heavy bag hanging in the corner. The first punch landed with a satisfying thud, then another, and another. Each strike released a tiny bit of the frustration she'd been bubbling up all day. Her breathing fell into rhythm with her movements as she flowed through combinations she knew by heart. "You're hitting harder than usual." Imani stopped mid-punch at the sound of her father's voice. He stood at the bottom of the stairs, arms crossed, watching her with knowing eyes. "Just getting a good workout," she said, wiping sweat from her forehead. Her father walked over to hold the bag steady. "This bag isn't Madison Taylor." Imani froze. "How did you?" "Mrs. Chen called. Said there might be some girl trouble." He nodded toward the bag. "Want to talk about it instead of beating up our equipment?" Imani sighed and let her arms drop to her sides. "It's nothing I can't handle." "I know you can handle yourself," her father said gently. "That's what worries me. Remember our agreement when we moved here?" "No fighting, focus on school," Imani recited. "I remember, Dad. I'm not going to fight anyone." Her father studied her face. "There's more than one way to fight, Imani. The mind is the first battlefield." He tapped her forehead. "Meditation. 20 minutes. Then we'll practice your defensive moves only." As Imani sat cross-legged on the mat, trying to clear her mind, Madison's smirking face kept appearing in her thoughts. Tomorrow would be another day of small aggressions and petty insults. Another day of restraint. But even champions had their breaking points. And Imani could feel hers getting closer. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual lunchtime chaos. Imani had found a spot at the corner table with Jasmine and 2 other students, Louise, who was in her physics class, and Diane, a quiet basketball player who rarely spoke but had a kind smile. "You've got to try the fries." Lewis pushed his tray toward Imani. "Only decent thing they make here." Imani took one with a grateful nod. 3 weeks into the school year, and these lunch periods had become the bright spot in her day. Nowhere else in Westridge High did she feel this comfortable. "Did you finish that history assignment?" Jasmine asked, pulling out her notebook. "I'm stuck on the Civil War questions." "I can help," Imani offered. "My old school covered that last year." As they bent their heads over the homework, Imani felt a familiar prickling sensation on the back of her neck. She didn't need to look up to know Madison and her crew had entered the cafeteria. Lately, they'd escalated from whispers and bumps to more direct actions. A foot stuck out to trip her in gym class, her locker mysteriously jammed with gum, and names scrawled on bathroom walls with nasty comments. "Ignore them," Dean murmured, noticing her tension. "They feed off attention." Imani nodded and forced herself to focus on Jasmine's notes, but the sound of Madison's laugh grew closer, setting her nerves on edge. Her father's training sessions had intensified at home, focusing on restraint techniques and meditation, as if he sensed her growing frustration. "Well, if it isn't the charity case corner," Madison's voice rang out as she stopped at their table, flanked by her usual followers. She carried a chocolate milk carton in one hand, casually swirling it. Lewis stiffened. Jasmine looked down. Dean's jaw clenched. "We're just eating lunch, Madison," Imani said calmly, not looking up from Jasmine's notebook. "No need to stop by." "I'm just being friendly." Madison's voice dripped with fake sweetness, welcoming the new girl. She leaned over the table. "I heard you live in those apartments by the train tracks. Must be rough coming to Westridge from, where was it again?" "The ghetto." The cafeteria had grown quieter. Nearby tables were watching now. Imani slowly looked up, meeting Madison's eyes. "I live in Oak Hills apartments, and before that, we owned a house in Atlanta." Her voice remained steady. "My father runs a business. Anything else you'd like to know about my family?" Madison's smirk faltered at Imani's calm response. This wasn't the reaction she'd been fishing for. She needed to up the ante. "Actually, I do have a question." Madison tilted her head. "Do they not teach manners where you're from?" Because when someone of, she looked Imani up and down, "your background comes to our school, you should know your place." The words hung in the air, their meaning unmistakable. Dean half rose from his seat, but Imani placed a hand on his arm, keeping her eyes locked on Madison. "And where exactly is my place?" Imani asked, her voice dangerously soft. The tension stretched like a rubber band pulled too tight. Then Madison smiled, slow and cruel. "Let me show you." It happened so fast. Madison's hand tipped, and the chocolate milk poured directly onto Imani's white school shirt, spreading a dark brown stain across her chest and lap. Gasps and a few nervous laughs rippled through the cafeteria. "Oops," Madison said loudly, "now it matches your skin." More laughter followed, emboldening her. Time seemed to slow for Imani. She felt the cold liquid seeping through her clothes. She saw Madison's triumphant smile. She heard the laughter. Something inside her shifted, a lock turning, a door opening to the fighter she'd been trying to keep caged. With deliberate calm, Imani stood up. The cafeteria fell silent. Every eye watched as she slowly stepped around the table to face Madison directly. Years of competition had taught Imani how to control her presence, how to stand, how to breathe, how to make herself felt without a word. The two girls stood toe to toe. Madison, initially confident in her power play, now seemed unsure. Something in Imani's stance, in the steadiness of her gaze, made the bully take an unconscious step backward. "You should be careful who you pick fights with," Imani said, her voice quiet enough that Madison had to lean in to hear. "Some of us know how to finish them." Without another word, Imani turned and walked toward the bathroom, back straight, head high, the crowd parting before her. She didn't see the phone that had recorded the entire exchange, or know that by the end of fifth period, her words would take on new meaning. Because someone had found videos of her fighting career in Atlanta, and by the final bell, everyone at Westridge High would know exactly who they had been messing with. The final bell rang, releasing students into the crisp afternoon air. Imani hurried across the school grounds, her stained shirt now covered with a borrowed gym sweater from Jasmine. She just wanted to get home, away from the whispers that had followed her all afternoon. "Imani, wait up," Jasmine called, jogging to catch up. Her face looked worried as she fell into step beside her friend. "You need to see something." "If it's about the milk incident, I'm trying to forget it," Imani said, quickening her pace. "It's not that." "Well, not exactly." Jasmine pulled out her phone and held it up. "Someone found videos of you. Fighting videos." Imani stopped walking. "What?" "Look." Jasmine tapped the screen, showing a TikTok compilation that had been making rounds through the school. There was Imani, 2 years younger but unmistakable, dominating opponents in various fighting competitions. The clips showed her executing perfect takedowns, lightning-fast kicks, and submission holds that made her opponents tap out within seconds. The video ended with a clip of her raising a championship belt above her head, the caption reading, "Westridge's new girl isn't just any new girl." Imani's heart sank. How many people have seen this? "Pretty much everyone," Jasmine admitted. "It started circulating right after lunch. Tyler from the track team recognized you from some sports website and found the videos." A group of freshmen walked by, staring openly at Imani before hurrying past, whispering excitedly. "Great," Imani sighed. "So much for blending in." "Are you kidding? This is amazing," Jasmine exclaimed. "You're like a secret superhero or something. Why didn't you tell me?" Before Imani could answer, her phone buzzed with a text from her father, "Coming to pick you up. Wait at the front." "I've got to go," Imani told Jasmine. "My dad's coming." "Is he going to be mad about the videos?" Imani shrugged, though she already knew the answer. "Probably. He wanted me to leave all that behind when we moved here." As they rounded the corner toward the parking lot, Imani stopped short. Madison and 4 of her friends stood in a loose semicircle near the running track, away from where teachers supervised the main exit. Their posture, the way they scanned the passing students, they were waiting for someone. "Let's go the other way," Jasmine suggested, noticing them too. But it was too late. Madison had spotted them and was already pointing in their direction. "There she is, the fake fighter girl." Imani took a deep breath. "You go ahead. I'll handle this." "Are you crazy?" "There's 5 of them," Jasmine whispered. "Trust me," Imani said with a calm she didn't entirely feel. "Just go get Mr. Rivera from the gym if you want to help." Reluctantly, Jasmine headed toward the gym building while Imani walked steadily toward the group of girls. Students who noticed what was happening began to gather at a safe distance, phones already out. "Took you long enough," Madison called out as Imani approached. "We've been waiting to talk about your little videos." Imani stopped about 10 feet away, setting her backpack down carefully. She counted 5 girls total, noting their positions just as she'd been taught to assess multiple opponents. Madison stood front and center, flanked by Kenzie and Olivia, with 2 more girls Imani didn't know by name positioned slightly behind. "There's nothing to talk about," Imani said evenly. "I'm just trying to go home." "After you embarrassed me in the cafeteria?" "I don't think so." Madison stepped forward. "Those videos are fake anyway. No way you're some champion fighter. You're just a nobody trying to seem special." Students had formed a loose circle around them now, the energy shifting as they sensed a confrontation brewing. "I don't want trouble," Imani said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This isn't worth it, Madison." "Scared now that you don't have an audience cheering for you?" Madison taunted, moving closer. "We don't need your kind bringing down our school with fake videos and attitude." The words stung, but Imani kept her expression neutral. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "The real test isn't whether you can win a fight, it's whether you can avoid one." "I'm giving you one chance to walk away," Imani stated calmly, her hands relaxed at her sides. "All of you." Madison laughed and looked around at her friends, emboldened by their presence. "Or what? You'll karate chop us." In a sudden movement, Madison lunged forward, her open palm aiming for Imani's face in a slap that would have landed hard if it had connected. But her hand never reached its target. In a motion too quick for most onlookers to follow, Imani caught Madison's wrist inches from her cheek. She held it firmly but not painfully, her grip precise, just enough to stop the blow without causing harm. The crowd gasped. Madison's eyes widened in shock. "That was your chance?" Imani said quietly, releasing the wrist and stepping back into a neutral stance. Now everyone would see if the videos were real or not. Time seemed to slow down as Madison yanked her wrist free, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. The circle of students had grown larger, phones held high to capture whatever happened next. "You think you're so tough?" Madison's voice shook slightly. She glanced at her friends, who had suddenly become less eager to get involved. "Get her." Madison lunged forward again, this time with a wild punch aimed at Imani's stomach. Imani simply stepped to the side, letting Madison's momentum carry her stumbling forward, nearly falling face first onto the track. The crowd let out a collective "oh." Two of Madison's friends, Kenzie and Olivia, rushed at Imani from different directions. With a calm that came from years of practice, Imani waited until the last possible moment before executing a perfect pivot step. The two girls, unable to stop their charge, collided with each other instead. They fell in a tangle of limbs, groaning more from embarrassment than pain. "Is this for real?" Someone in the crowd shouted. "Just like the videos," another voice called out. Madison scrambled back to her feet, her perfect hair now disheveled, mascara smudging under one eye. "What are you waiting for?" she screamed at her two remaining friends, who hung back uncertainly. Imani stood in the center of the chaos, her breathing controlled, her stance relaxed but ready. She hadn't thrown a single punch, not one kick, not one aggressive move. She was simply redirecting their energy, using their own anger against them, just as her father had taught her since she was 5 years old. "You don't have to do this," Imani called to the hesitant girls. "Nobody has to get hurt here." One of them, a tall girl with braided hair, shook her head and stepped back. "This is crazy, Madison. She's not even fighting back, and you guys look stupid." "Fight AK." Madison screamed at Imani, frustrated tears forming in her eyes. "Hit me. Do something." Imani remained centered, her voice steady when she replied, "I don't need to." The crowd had fallen silent, watching this unexpected turn of events. Many had come expecting a beatdown, a violent clash to share on social media. Instead, they were witnessing something more powerful, restraint in the face of aggression. Madison, seeing her social status crumbling before her eyes, made one last desperate attempt. She charged at Imani again, this time with everything she had. Imani waited until the last second, then executed a simple leg sweep, the most basic move taught in her father's dojo. Madison's feet left the ground, and she landed on her back with a thud that knocked the wind from her lungs. Standing over the fallen bully, Imani spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've won championships against opponents who train every day. What made you think you stood a chance?" The circle of students had gone completely quiet. Even those still recording seemed too stunned to comment. Madison lay on her back, gasping for breath, the fight gone from her eyes. Imani knelt beside her fallen opponent. "Can you breathe okay?" she asked quietly. Madison nodded slightly, her eyes wide with confusion at the concern in Imani's voice. "Good." Imani stood and offered her hand. "This is over then." For a moment, Madison just stared at the outstretched hand. Then, reluctantly, she took it, allowing Imani to help her to her feet. "Imani." The crowd parted as Mr. Rivera, the gym teacher, pushed through with Jasmine close behind him. His eyes scanned the scene, Madison's disheveled appearance, her friends looking sheepish, and Imani standing calmly in the middle of it all. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Before anyone could answer, the sound of a car horn drew Imani's attention. Her father's sedan was parked at the curb, and she could see him watching from the driver's seat, his expression unreadable. "Just a misunderstanding," Imani said, picking up her backpack. "It's sorted now." As she walked away, she heard whispers rippling through the crowd. "Did you see how she moved? She didn't even hit anyone. That was the most badass thing I've ever seen." Imani kept her eyes forward, heading toward her father's car. She had kept her promise. Technically, she hadn't fought anyone at all. The ride home with her father was silent. Imani stayed out the window, watching the neighborhoods change as they drove. She could feel her dad's eyes flicking to her occasionally, but neither spoke until they pulled into their apartment complex. So, he finally said, turning off the engine, "Want to tell me what happened today?" Imani sighed. "How much do you already know?" Mrs. Chen called. said there was an incident after school. He turned to face her. And that videos of your competitions are all over the school now. Imani nodded, looking down at her hands. I didn't start it, Dad. This girl, Madison, she's been messing with me since day one. Today, she tried to ambush me with her friends. And I defended myself, that's all. Imani looked up, meeting her father's gaze. I didn't throw a single punch. I swear. I just redirected, like you taught me. For a long moment, her father studied her face. Then, unexpectedly, his serious expression melted into a small smile. I know. Mr. Rivera sent me a video while you were walking to the car. He did. Her father nodded. He wanted me to see how you handled yourself before the school meeting tomorrow. School meeting? Imani's stomach dropped. Principal's office, 9 a.m. He placed a hand on her shoulder. But don't worry, you're not in trouble. The principal's office was smaller than Imani had expected. She sat beside her father, back straight, hands folded in her lap. Across from them, Principal Wong reviewed something on her computer screen, occasionally glancing up at them over her glasses. Madison and her mother sat on the other side of the room. Madison kept her eyes down, her usual confidence nowhere to be seen. Her mother, a sharp-featured woman in an expensive suit, tapped her manicured nails impatiently on the armrest. Well, Principal Wong said finally, turning her screen so everyone could see it. I've reviewed the videos from yesterday's incident. Multiple videos, actually, since it seems half the student body was recording. On the screen, Imani could see herself standing calmly as Madison and her friends tried to attack her. The footage clearly showed Imani defending without attacking. Miss Taylor, the principal addressed Madison directly. Would you like to explain your actions? Madison shifted uncomfortably. It was just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Madison's mother interrupted. These videos show that girl attacking my daughter. Principal Wong raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Taylor, the videos clearly show your daughter attempting to strike first, while Ms. Jackson only defended herself without throwing a single punch. This is ridiculous, Mrs. Taylor huffed. That girl embarrassed my daughter in front of the whole school. She should be the one facing consequences. Imani's father leaned forward slightly. My daughter has been dealing with harassment from Madison since her first day here. The milk incident in the cafeteria was just the latest in a series of provocations. Principal Wong nodded. We're aware. Several students have come forward since yesterday with accounts of bullying behavior. She turned back to Madison. This pattern of behavior cannot continue at Westridge. Madison's face flushed red, but she remained silent. Madison will be suspended for 2 weeks, Principal Wong announced. And upon return, she'll participate in our school's peer mediation program. This is outrageous. Mrs. Taylor stood up. We donate thousands to this school every year. And we appreciate your support, Principal Wong said firmly. But our anti-bullying policy applies to everyone, regardless of their family's contributions. Mrs. Taylor grabbed her purse and Madison's arm. Come on, Madison, we're leaving. She turned at the door. You'll be hearing from our lawyer. After they left, Principal Wong turned to Imani with a softer expression. As for you, Ms. Jackson, while I understand you were defending yourself, fighting of any kind isn't permitted on school grounds. Imani nodded. I understand. Your father taught you well, Principal Wong continued, surprising Imani. Both restraint and skill. She smiled slightly. Mr. Rivera was quite impressed. He asked if you might consider helping with some self-defense workshops for the girls' athletic teams. Imani blinked in surprise. Really? Principal Wong nodded. But first, you'll serve 1 day of in-school suspension, not for defending yourself, but for not reporting the ongoing bullying to a teacher or counselor before it escalated. That's fair, Imani's father said. As they left the office, Imani felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. In the hallway, students looked at her differently now, not with fear, but with a newfound respect. Some nodded as she passed, others offered small smiles. Your mother called this morning, her father said as they walked toward the exit. I told her what happened. Was she mad? 3 weeks had passed since the showdown with Madison, and Westridge High felt like a different place. Imani walked through the hallways with her head high, no longer trying to blend into the background. Students greeted her by name, and even teachers seemed to have a new respect for her. "There she is, our celebrity," Jasmine teased as Imani joined her at their usual lunch table. Louis and Dion were already there, sagging seats. "Please don't call me that," Imani groaned, though she couldn't help smiling. "I just want things to go back to normal." "Normal flew out the window when you became the coolest girl in school," Louis said, sliding his chocolate pudding toward her as a peace offering. "Have you seen how many followers you have now?" After the videos of the confrontation went viral within their school, someone had created a social media page highlighting female fighters. They'd asked Imani to share her story, and to her surprise, her father had encouraged it, saying that inspiring other young women to learn self-defense was a positive use of her skills. "The self-defense workshop is officially approved," Dion announced, sliding a paper across the table. As captain of the basketball team, he had connections with the athletic department and had been helping Imani set things up. Mr. Rivera got the principal to agree. 2 sessions a week after school, starting next Monday. "That's great." Imani picked up the paper, scanning the details. What had started as Mr. Rivera's casual suggestion had grown into something real, a workshop where Imani could teach basic self-defense techniques to other students, particularly girls. "You nervous?" Jasmine asked. "A little," Imani admitted. "Teaching is different from competing." "You'll be amazing," Dion said with quiet confidence. As they continued eating, a hush fell over their section of the cafeteria. Imani looked up to see Madison standing at the edge of their table, alone. It was her first day back from suspension. Madison looked different, her usual perfect appearance slightly subdued, her confident posture replaced with something more cautious. The cafeteria watched, collectively holding its breath, waiting for drama. "Can I talk to you?" Madison asked Imani, her voice lacking its usual edge. "Alone?" Imani glanced at her friends, then nodded. "Sure." They walked to a quiet corner near the vending machines, away from curious ears. "I'm supposed to give you this," Madison handed Imani an envelope. "It's part of my peer mediation assignment." A formal apology letter. Imani took the envelope but didn't open it. "Thanks." Madison shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I know a letter doesn't fix anything. What I did was, it was wrong." The words seemed to cost her, each one dragging out reluctantly. "Why did you do it?" Imani asked, genuinely curious. Madison stayed at the floor. "Honestly? Because you didn't seem scared of me. Everyone else at this school either kisses up to me or avoids me. You just existed, like I wasn't important." She looked up. "It sounds stupid saying it out loud." "It's not stupid," Imani said, "just human." An awkward silence stretched between them. "I heard about your self-defense workshop," Madison finally said. "That's cool." "Thanks." Madison took a deep breath. "I was wondering, could I come? To learn?" The question caught Imani by surprise. "You want to join the workshop?" "The mediation counselor said I should find positive outlets," Madison explained quickly. "And after seeing what you can do." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "I want to learn, for real, not to fight people, just to, I don't know, be stronger." Imani studied the girl who had made her first months at Westridge so difficult. The easy answer would be no, but her father's voice echoed in her head. The true path of martial arts is not about making enemies, but transforming them. "First session is Monday after school," Imani said. "Don't be late." The gym was packed for the first workshop. Imani stood at the center of the blue mats that Mr. Rivera had set up, facing nearly 30 students, mostly girls, but a few boys too. Her father stood at the back, arms crossed, watching with quiet pride. "Self-defense isn't about hurting others," Imani began, her voice stronger than she expected. "It's about protecting yourself while causing the least harm possible." She demonstrated a simple wrist escape, then paired everyone up to practice. Moving through the crowd, she corrected stances and adjusted grips. When she reached Madison, who was paired with Jasmine, she found the former bully struggling with the technique. "You're using too much force," Imani explained, showing the movement again. "It's not about strength, it's about leverage and timing." Madison tried again, this time executing the move perfectly. "That's it," Imani nodded approvingly. As the session continued, Imani caught her father's eye across the room. He gave her a small nod that contained volumes of approval. By the end of the hour, the energy in the gym had transformed. Students who had entered as strangers were laughing together, bonded by the shared experience. New friendships were forming across previously rigid social lines. Same time Wednesday, Imani called as they began to disperse. As the gym emptied, Imani began rolling up the mats with her father's help. "You're a natural teacher," he said, "just like your mother." "I never thought I'd be doing this here," Imani admitted. "When we moved, I thought I was leaving fighting behind." Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't bring fighting to this school, Imani. You brought something better. You brought respect." Looking around at what she had created, a space where strength meant protection rather than intimidation, Imani finally felt at home. Westridge High would never be perfect, but it was changing. And sometimes change was all you could ask for.